Welcome everybody to the 2021 Transgender Day of Remembrance here in the city of South Bend. My name is Megan Buell. My pronouns are she and her. I'm the president and founder of an organization that goes by the acronym of TREES Inc., Transgender Resource Education and Enrichment Services. We are glad to be working with the Civil Rights Heritage Center, the LGBTQ Center, and Mosaic Health and Healing Arts to bring this event to you today. The Transgender Day of Remembrance is an international event, and people are gathering across the world on this day to remember trans lives lost, non-binary lives lost in the last 12 months. It has been an event that has been coordinated and happening since around 1998. I believe here in our area, this is the 9th or 10th year that we've had this being organized, and it's grown every year, and it has changed. As you can see, we're in a different setting this year, and the event's a little, it'll be a little different than we've done in the past, but I think it will be a memorable evening together. Why do we gather? We come together because violence against the transgender community continues to happen, and it is increasing. This year marks the most trans people who have been murdered in the United States. As of yesterday, 47 trans and non-binary persons have been murdered in the United States. I remember the first event that I was involved with, there was 31 names. So it's trending in the wrong direction. And I think the more that we can gather to reflect upon not only the lives lost, but the lives we need to save going forward. Trans Day of Remembrance is the time to come together and think about those, but it's not the only day every year that we need to act to save lives. Organizations here in town that I had mentioned as part of this event are all working every day to help change the culture where we are so that violence can be diminished rather than escalated, as it seems to be happening. We have been fortunate here not to have a death related to somebody's identity as trans or non-binary. I'm not sure if it's because we have the right kind of culture or if we've just been lucky. Regardless of what the reason is for that, we have to guard against becoming complacent about safety. So part of this event will also be a panel discussion to talk about trans inclusion, trans visibility, and trans safety in our neighborhoods. Missing from the audience are representatives of the most vulnerable communities. Okay. The highest percentage of lost life every year are trans women of color. Okay. In putting this event together, I tried to find someone to speak to that and represent that here in the community, and I could not find anybody. I don't think it's because they don't exist here. I just don't think that they're visible. This is the culture change that we can all work towards to make sure that everybody feels included and part of the community. How do we do that? Hopefully our panelists will have some good answers and suggestions for us to work as a team to do that. Because it isn't one person that makes change in your community. It is the whole community that makes change for others to feel more included. I want to take a second to recognize somebody who, without them, Trans Day of Remembrance in South Bend probably would not even have happened the first time. Last year, 2 days before the Trans Day event, we lost Reverend Lynn Young, who started all of this many years ago. And I personally think about them every day. And in planning this, I couldn't help but think of them because they and I had a lot of discussions in planning previous TDOR events. And on the table where the resources are is a little write-up and a picture of Reverend Young. So you can all learn a little bit about them and know that I kind of do this in their honor, but also they are part of this every year going forward. So, trans violence. Why is the trans community targeted so much? If we think about the culture in our communities, laws, ordinances, policies at organizations and businesses, and we think about the barriers and the challenges that are out there, a lot of them really put a burden upon the trans community to live good lives, enriched lives, involved in their community type of lives. If we think about self-accusation, I won't say that again. We go through all those steps of that pyramid, and we think about the things that we as human beings need in order to feel authentic, included, and truly love ourselves. And you think about the safety factor and the love factor and the self-esteem factors and your basic needs of shelter and food and the barriers that don't allow the trans community to find those things. You know, job protection, housing protections. When you don't have those, sometimes you have to trade safety to gain those. When you have to trade your safety to get food in your stomach, it could put you in harm's way. When you have to trade your safety to have a roof over your head so you're not living in the streets, it puts you in harm's way. Putting yourself in harm's way is why these numbers are not moving in the right direction. And we have to look at how our community works to make sure that the trans community has an equal opportunity for jobs, for housing, and for inclusion. I think that really drives down to the root cause of why we have this event. The ultimate goal is not to meet on November 20th every year to reflect upon trans lives lost. It should become a day of celebration that we have 0 trans lives lost. This evening you're gonna hear me talk about a few things. We have some local musicians who are gonna play some music for you. We have a panel discussion. So right now I'm gonna yield the floor to People Use Lyrics, a local duo, to help us find a space for reflection. So also involved with this evening are thinking about who the people that we lost. Some of you were mingling before we gathered in here. And in the center room of the Civil Rights Heritage Center here are posters with the names and brief descriptions of the people we have lost. A lot of times at Trans Day of Remembrance, we read names and then we move on, and we don't really get to know who these people were. And I wanted to make it a point for everybody to see the picture and to read the names and find out a little bit about the people. In addition to that, across in the room on the far side, the LGBTQ Center has brought an event or an interactive project that I think everyone should go find out about and include yourself in that project. It can be very empowering when you feel included with what's going on and for the future. What are names? What are names? Each of us are given a name when we're brought into this world. Some of us change those names. Personally, one of the coolest things about being trans was the opportunity to rename myself and the process I went through in order to pick my names. For me, it helped me really start to love myself when I had a name that I chose and that I really connected with. And I think sometimes we get assigned a name and we may not be happy about that. That doesn't mean that you can't, even if you're not trans, go and change your names. But why can't a name be personal, right? Why can't it have meaning? So being trans is tough. Being able to rename yourself is one of the small little perks for me, of who I am. And a lot of thought went into it. For those that don't know the story about my middle name, right now it's Ray, R-A-Y-E. But my previous middle name was Raymond. I was named after my father and my grandfather. Okay. So when it came time to pick a middle name, I really wanted to bring some of my past forward with me. But I didn't just arbitrarily change the name. I felt it would be respectful to ask my father if I could shorten it and keep it still as Ray, but since it was his name that I was given, I wanted him to be part of that process and give me the okay. When I asked him about it, he said he was honored that I would ask him, and he would be even more honored for me to do that. And then we both cried. So there's power in names. So when you see the posters out here and you read those names, a lot of those names might have been chosen at birth, and a lot of those names they may have chosen themselves. So they're really connected with them, but they are very personal to them, and we will do them honor by learning them. In printing those posters, I read all the bios multiple times and the names. And as I looked at pictures, I reflected upon, ooh, that looks like so-and-so. Ooh, that looks like so-and-so. And I couldn't stop myself from thinking, because I identify as trans, am I going to be on there some year? Is one of my friends going to be on there some year? And it kind of stops you, and you start to think about mortality. And for the trans community, this is something that is thought about a lot, because sometimes it's very dangerous to walk out your doors. Okay. And these names on these posters may be people elsewhere. And you may not ever think, well, I don't know them, I've never met them, they're just names. January 2019, I was at a conference in Dallas, Texas. Pretty big conference, and a lot of the demographics would have little meeting rooms, up in one of the suites of the hotel. And the transgender community had a meeting room, and I decided just to go up there and hang out, meet some people, just chat. So I was talking to this lady across the table from me, and they were from Dallas and really had been active in a lot of the programming because their daughter was trans. And this was only a few months after, Trans Day of Remembrance 2018, and we were talking about the event, and I could see she was starting to get very emotional. And so I said, are you all right? And she goes, well, it was very tough last November because my daughter was one of the names. See, I knew I was going to cry. And I asked what her daughter's name was. It was Carla. And you know what? I didn't remember that name from our Trans Day of Remembrance. And I felt so sad that I wouldn't know who that was. So I went back and researched and read everything I could about this lady's daughter. It was the most powerful, healing hug that I ever gave a stranger in my life, because we both released so much energy at that moment. So these names may just be names now, but you never know when you're going to run into somebody that's going to say, that was my son, that was my daughter, that was my child. Again, we can do honor for everybody that we've lost by really getting to know who they were as people and trying to make things better going forward. Because it matters. You may not know it yet, but it matters. We're going to talk about safety and inclusion in our area in the panel. Our musicians are going to play another song, and then we're going to have a little bit of time to get the panel area set up. I encourage you to check the posters out, check the resources at the front, and the project in the other room. There are a few snacks and water over there too, if you so please. But I encourage you to talk amongst yourselves about what you've heard and reflect upon the people whose names and pictures and write-ups are out there. So, on some of the chairs are candles. I couldn't find enough for everybody. And if you twist the bottom, the little light will come on. So I want to take 1 minute right now for some silence and some candles, just to reflect Thank you, everybody. People use lyrics. I yield to you. So that concludes the vigil part of the program. So again, I encourage you to mingle. You can leave the candles on the chairs. We'll pick those up. And we will reconvene in about 10 or 15 minutes with the panel. So thank you, everybody.
that. I can just pop my, I can just drop my my initials in there anytime.
Oh, that's part of the fun. It's sex to keep pulling them up. I don't know what you said, but I think you told me to talk.
I said speak with confidence.
I do, whether I know what I'm saying or not.
I told you to talk and then.
Good evening and welcome to the Apollo. Hello? Is that going to work? Probably not. Yeah. I'm probably just better off not bothering and just using my big mouth. What's that? Yeah? Does this...
Is that going to work?
That's actually sounds really safe.
Nailed it.
Improvise.
All right, welcome back. Hope everybody had a good opportunity to read some names and learn about some folks out there. We're coming back together as a group now for a panel discussion. As I had mentioned earlier, three important factors for trans inclusion in our communities are, in fact, inclusion, visibility, and safety as it relates to the trans and non-binary communities. We've brought together some leaders in our community here to talk about those items, as well as be able to answer your questions on those topics as well. We do have a microphone set up in the back, and we will coordinate questions. And also from our folks who are joining on Zoom, they'll have an opportunity to ask questions. Yeah, you're on camera.
Yeah, we're waving.
Yep. So, our panelists, I will let them introduce themselves to you all.
Hello, my name is H.R. Jung, he, him pronouns. I'm the executive director at the LGBTQ Center here in South Bend.
I'm Jen Faulkner-Jones. I use she and they pronouns. I identify as queer and non-binary, and I'm the director of counseling and mental wellness at Mosaic Health and Healing Arts in Goshen.
I'm Andrea Petrus, she, her pronouns. I'm just very out and open everywhere I go.
Thank you all. Don't let Andrea fool you. Andrea really has stepped up in a lot of ways as a leader for the trans community in our area. So you are important to everything here. So
I'm just hard to miss.
yes. So I will start. First question. This is for HR. What do you see as the impact of having a community center in a community as it relates to the trans inclusion?
Sure. First, thank you, Megan, for sending these questions out in advance so that I don't end up rambling endlessly, which I can do. But I think there's a lot of really good reasons, a lot of great things that come out of having a community center in a community. But I think the two most important ones that come to mind, one is it's a space, and in that space, work can get done, and that work can be multiple things, but I think the most important work that can be done is building community. And that community can be just you and the friends that you develop, the network, your chosen family, however you want to describe them, from coming to group meetings, from volunteering, from coming to events, being out and visible and creating that community, but it's also creating a larger community. We think about the larger trans and LGBTQ community here in the Michiana area. And I think that's what community centers do most, is kind of allow that community to be created and for people to thrive and live within that. Because again, safety in numbers, the more of us together, the stronger we are. And I think that's why having a physical space is so important. The other part is it also is an opportunity for education to the rest of the community. Because I'm sure everybody on this panel up here has been asked to come and talk about the LGBTQ experience or the trans experience on multiple occasions by people who want to know more. And I think that's really important because there are a lot of people out in the community who want to understand and want to be allies and want to be supportive, but they're bombarded with a lot of misinformation and bad narratives that are out there. And unless something like a center exists, there's not a lot of opportunities for voices to counter that narrative. to actually speak truth and to tell, the good information that to counter that bad information that keeps coming out to everybody. So I think really when it comes to trans visibility, trans inclusion, and the greater queer community, having that there to build community and to also educate are probably the two big components to that I think are really important.
Thank you so much. It is a good thing I sent those out. You studied well. I've sat on a lot of panels, and it is absolutely, if you ever put a panel together, please send your questions ahead of time. It's tough to get blindsided.
Yes.
So this question is directed for Jen. Would you speak to the power of transvisibility for a trans non-binary person's mental health?
I did not prepare as well as HR because I feel like I talk about this all day, every day. Representation matters,
Yes.
right? And seeing healthy queer people, that matters. And seeing people who look like us and move like us and are empowered like us in the world, that matters. And so when we, very often in my work, when I'm working with a young trans or non-binary person, like helping them find healthy models in the community that they can look to see that they're going to be okay, that they have a place, that they can be healthy and empowered, and they can be active in the community and do all of the wonderful things. And when we don't have visibility, we just don't see those options for ourselves. So that was a much shorter answer than HR. But,
Good, because I'm going to direct a follow-up to you.
okay.
How does that play into that visibility for the trans and queer community in giving parents of trans youth? What kind of impact does that have on parents of trans and queer youth?
Sure. So what we know from research is that having one person honor a person's name and pronouns, a young person's name, reduces the risk of suicidality. We know that the risk drops drastically. We also know that if parents are affirming of name and gender identity, the risks of depression and anxiety are no greater than their cis counterparts, right? So when we talk about queer youth, and very often there's this language about like the mental health disparities, that's not inherent with their identity, their minority identity with gender or sexuality. It's a result of the minority stress that those people hold. And so, it is life-saving to be the one person that can see that kid. It's life-saving for parents to be the one space that kid can find a soft place to land at the end of the day and be affirmed in their name and their identity.
Awesome. So you are prepared. Andrea, how are we doing down there?
Still here?
All right.
I haven't crawled under the table yet.
Very good. This question is for you. What steps would you see as vital to improving trans safety in our community?
Oh, yeah, not the least prepared one there is. Just the whole visibility thing is hugely important. You can legislate all you want, but until people get to know you and see that we're not the freaks and monsters that we're made out to be or have been for so long, you have to change hearts, you have to change minds, because legislating it just doesn't work. It can only go so far, which is why we have all those names and pictures out there. Obviously, the law didn't protect them, and if you had a chance to know them or any of us, it might make things different. That being said, I hate to bring up the fact that I don't have a lot of trust. I have no personal bad experiences with law enforcement. However, they don't have a good track record. And organizations like that could really benefit from some training, and hope it works. Again, once you get to know somebody, it's a little harder to treat them like crap.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, those are the two best things that I can think of anyway.
Well, thank you. Now this question is for each of the panelists, and you can decide amongst yourselves who's going to go first.
Paper, rock, scissors.
But it's a simple one. Name one factor negatively impacting trans inclusion, visibility, and safety in Michiana, and your suggestion for addressing it. This is where we get the juicy stuff.
I know, right?
All right.
Well, I'll go. Nobody else is jumping up and going. I think I talked about this earlier. I think it's the misinformation. I think there's just society-wide, social media, the news, television, radio, everywhere. There's a lot of bad information out there. You know, trans and queer people are still, you know, used in the old tropes in television and film, and it's changing, but not enough. There's still a lot of that misinformation that's out there, you know, and there's a lot of good people who hear that, believe that, and think that they're working in the best interest of people. And I think how we can kind of combat that is getting the right information out there. You know, we're a table full of trusted resources up here. And, you know, as long as we can get that message out and kind of counter those narratives, you know, it's not easy because, you know, we're four single voices up here against a sea of just bad and negative information coming out at us. So, you know, that's why, you know, I look to all of you to help kind of spread those messages and that understanding. As Andrea said, you know, if people know you and understand you, it's harder for them to come at you, to threaten your safety. And I think that's, to me, I see that as one of the, there are multiple threats, but I see that as one of the big ones.
So I always think it's, you know, whatever we can do to disrupt gender norms, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's, you know, auditing your own experience in the world and auditing how you learn to perform gender in the world and where those messages came from and what was at stake for your culture of origin in performing those. And so sort of like once you audit your own experience, very often we see all this gender diversity, right? And when we can start to unpack that, then I think inclusion is just, it's just the next step. So I know it's sort of like a idealistic take, but I don't know that gender norms are working well for anybody. And so once we sort of can dig those up and audit ourselves, you know, then I think radical change can happen.
Thank you. You do know the word audit scares people. Just saying. But we should be all. But we all should be, you know, not afraid of being more transparent, right?
Right.
I get it.
Andrea, you can follow that up.
Yeah, no, there's no following.
Follow the pun.
The queen of puns has spoken.
That was a pun.
I kind of don't even know where to go with this. Again, it's kind of hard for me to, I've been very fortunate because I can't say that I've had any really bad experiences. I've encountered a lot of jerks. I've had some people come into work and cause problems. They're no longer welcome at work. I have some amazing coworkers that if somebody gets out of line, they're the first ones to stand up and politely correct them as long as they can, and then it goes from there. But I mean, get involved with the community. anything that you do that can change other people's, again, hearts and minds, that's the best thing you can do. So.
Very good, thank you. That's going to lead into the next group question. Please give some insights as to how local businesses and community leaders can impact trans inclusion, visibility, and safety. So, and Andrea, I'm going to, only because I know Andrea really well. The place you went over in Mishawaka, the 100 Center, about the bathrooms.
Yes.
Could you share that story?
Okay, so a few years ago, I went over to a bar got done with an event and was invited to meet friends at a bar in Mishawaka. And I walked in there and I was not dressed like the over 40 crowd that was there that evening. I had been at an event where I believe the dress code was formal funky, and I'm wearing some serious heels, a kind of a long, showy dress, and I walked up there and realized I didn't have my ID, and someone that I knew had met me at the door and apparently stayed behind and was talking to them and overheard the door person, because I'd gone back to my car to get my ID, and the door person had said something, made some comment about, well, they're not using XX bathroom, and the friend that was there got pretty upset and kind of met me at the door and said, look, and also kind of laid into them apparently. And I walked in and handed the guy my ID, which I had legally transitioned at that point, so all my ID matched, and which was nice. And his attitude was, I mean, he was decent enough, but it's like, well, I guess we got to let her use the women's room. And that both kind of ticked me off about his attitude and made me stop and think about it, because at that point, St. Joe County had a trans-inclusive human rights ordinance. I mean, South Bend did and had for some time. St. Joe County did, and I don't remember at that point how long they'd had it, but obviously the word hadn't gotten around to places, and I was in a mood to deal with somebody, and when I left, I talked to the guy and pointed out, I said, look, St. Joe County's got an HRO, and you people have to follow this, and he was very nice. He apologized that I didn't know, and so I took it upon myself to make copies of the ordinance, highlight the parts that were relevant, and show up during the week to talk to the manager. And the manager was actually very nice about it, apologized profusely for their behavior and their ignorance, and said that they were going to they were already planning on a staff-wide meeting, and this would be one of the things they had some serious discussion over, because, yeah, sorry, we didn't know. And I actually haven't been back since. It's just not a place I tend to go. But hopefully, I've thought about going just to test the waters and see, because
Fair enough.
What are you doing?
yeah, exactly. And you also have to understand, I tend to walk through the world with both middle fingers in the air, and I just. That's kind of me, and it's like, leave me the hell alone. If you cause problems, the problem's yours until you make it mine, and then it's not going to be real pleasant, because I have been known to speak my mind. But yeah, that's one of the problems. It's like, yes, we have this ordinance. In fact, Megan and I were part of people involved in the inclusive language. And it's like that apparently the county council didn't do a very good job of getting this information out. And there's another thing, we have these laws, people need to be aware of it, and hopefully that will help.
Very good. Yes, that last point was the important point that I wanted to get to from the story was we have protections, but not everybody is aware of these protections, and business leaders and community leaders need to continue to understand that these laws are in place, and they need to make sure that their workplaces and their communities operate under those laws. So, anybody else?
Yeah, just as you were talking, Andrea, one of the things that comes up a lot is we hear that, for us, maybe we refer a patient out for another procedure, and we've talked to the medical provider, and they've said, yeah, we are welcoming, that's fine. And then they get a person on the phone who is not, right? They get a person on the phone that does some misgendering or some other really harmful behaviors. And so it's almost like this, I'm going to use audit again, right? Like, but there needs to be this systems audit. Like, everybody in a system has to be on the same page, because it doesn't matter if the top of the organization, it matters. It matters, but it also is the first person. That first person that meets somebody face to face. Those people also have to be on board. And if not, then you can hang the flags that you want, but you're not backing it up. I think we're past a point of like trusting that means you've done the work. That you've got to go a little bit deeper now, and really be actively engaged in allyship and advocacy.
Very good, great answer.
Going off of that, I think, you're right. It's more than just hanging a flag, putting your pronouns in your email signature block, which is great. Those are steps, and we appreciate those. But you're right. I think there needs to be, whatever your public-facing individuals are going to be, those are really the ones that have to have this training, that have to have this understanding. And if it's important to the company, then if they're not doing it, then you need to find somebody else to do it. I know that's hard to say and hard to hear for some people, but no, that's true. And the other thing is, what are you presenting out into the world as well? Do you do an intake? Do you have people fill out information before they work with you? All these things, and are you gendering things that don't need to be gendered? And that's a real important thing. And sometimes, people do it just because we've always done it this way. And it's like they never sit and audit or question why they do those things. And I think that's really important for companies and businesses and organizations to do, is say, okay, well, yeah, we've always done it this way. Something that always comes up is like, people say breast cancer for women. It's like, well, other people can have breast cancer as well. It's not just for women. Why are we gendering this? Yes, the vast majority are, cisgendered women, but that's not always the case. And so why do we do that? Questioning why we do things the way we do, I think, is really important. And you're right, it has to be all levels of the business or organization. And I just challenge a lot of places to look at their policies, look at their forms, look at all the things that they do that's a public facing, and even internally, I think is really important for those businesses and groups to do.
And I'm going to chime in as the moderator / panelist. Think about businesses and who those frontline first contact people are, and the amount of training that they need in order to do that effectively and respectfully. But those are also the people that are the highest amount of turnover in those companies. So your upper level are sitting and saying, well, we just did trans training last year. Why do we have to do it again? Heck, in those 12 months, they may have a whole new frontline crew, first contact crew. It should be part of the hiring practices. It should be part of orientation, is this is how we do it. It shouldn't be, once a month, or once a year, It should be part of every employee coming through the door, because there's such high turnover on those first contact positions that people are falling through the cracks and not getting that training, and mistakes are happening and lives are being affected. So keep that in mind as you work with business leaders and community leaders, that this is not a one-time and you're good to go. This has to be something that's discussed all the time. So thank you for your insight on that. George, do we have any questions from the Zoom world?
We have two comments. One is an acknowledgement that even though St. Joseph County has protections, Elkhart County does not. And I will add that many of our other surrounding counties do that as well. So just a reminder of what that is. And then the comment also is just acknowledging that the healthcare that people receive, trans and non-binary people, healthcare that they receive at those places is a threat to their safety. That sounds like something you might want to respond to.
Yeah. I mean, the amount of discrimination that we hear about every day is really overwhelming, and it's from recently some trans kids not knowing they can go to the bathroom at school, right? Because they would either have to out themselves or ask administration where a gender-neutral bathroom is, right? What do we know about the medical consequences of being dehydrated and what that does to your body? And everything up to, trans masculine people needing to find places to have a hysterectomy or normal preventative care. Trans women needing to have a mammogram, right? And being misgendered in those offices. I mean, the statistics about medical discrimination are terrifying. And what do we need to know to care for a person's body? We need to know their anatomical inventory. We need to know if a person has a cervix, if they have a prostate, if they have their tonsils, if they have, right? And so it's not hard, it's intentional to change how we access care and to change how we structure care. I shouldn't have to come out to the dentist if I'm on gender-affirming hormones, right? They shouldn't need to know that to take care of my teeth. And that's what we're finding. And again, then the minority stress, the emotional labor every day of navigating who you need to have that conversation with. It's unnecessary.
Well, and even before they come and face that discrimination, it's the barrier of not wanting to go at all because they know they're going to. They know that it's going to happen and they don't want to go, or they do go to medical professionals, and what don't they tell because they don't want to feel the judgment from that medical professional or the dentist or whomever, so is that really getting complete care at that point? Because you're omitting things. And that's not good. You should have an open, honest conversation with your physician about everything that you're doing so that if something does go wrong, they've got all the information to help diagnose you and help you. And I think, that's a huge barrier that I think a lot of people face, and it needs definitely to be addressed.
Our medical director, and it moves me every time I hear them say it, but they said, in a room full of medical students, they'll say, if you think you're not already treating trans or non-binary people, it means they don't trust you enough yet to tell you their truth.
Yes.
And it gives me goosebumps every time I hear it, like if you don't think that you are educating trans and non-binary kids, they might not feel safe with you. If you don't think you're preaching to trans and non-binary kids, they might not feel safe with you. I mean, this is everywhere. And that's, I can get really long-winded about it, but that's the visibility piece, right?
Right.
That's why it matters.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned, referring people and they say they're welcoming. We're at the trans community right now is at a point that we don't need friendly and welcoming, we need competent healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
And we need competent professionals in all aspects of your community. Liking something on Facebook or having a trans flag or a rainbow flag is not enough. We need people actively trying to make things better across the board. And, HR mentioned allyship. Allyship is critical to advance this safety, visibility, and inclusion on behalf of the queer community. You know, what are we doing? Are we talking the talk, or are we actually walking the walk? And I think it's time for people to raise their hand and say, what can I do actively in my community to make it better for queer people? So, yeah, this is my soapbox I'm standing on.
It's a very nice one.
But don't misinterpret Jen's Anatomy 101. She's not saying, they are not saying do a body audit.
No, we need to know what organs need preventative care.
Exactly.
And how you want to use them.
Yes.
There you go. Does anyone in the audience here have any questions that they would like to ask? The mic is,
And if you do, yeah,
the mic is open.
step up here for the benefit of our online folks.
So I can speak as the longest. I have some problematic friends, and I've tried to talk to them about the harm in content. This one, you know, for those who are aware, content like the closer from Dave Chappelle recently, I've been trying to explain why that's harmful, to get them to understand why jokes turn into violence and death. I'm sorry if this bothers people to bring this up, but I'd love to hear from all of you about your thoughts on how to explain that to people in our lives who don't understand that, who can't compute that because it doesn't affect them.
No, that's a hard one, especially with, you know, friends and family. You know, they're your friends and family for a reason, and that's sometimes a very difficult conversation to have. But sometimes you have to make it very personal with them, and also, if they don't get it, maybe it's time to move on and find some other friends. That's also a hard thing to do, but you know, for your own mental health, it's not good to be surrounded by people who are going to see the closer and go, oh yeah, that's funny, and repeat the jokes and continue doing that in front of you, because that's harmful to you and your mental health, and you're more important than those friends. Your life and your mental health stability is more important than that. And if they don't understand that, then it's just as simple as, I can't spend time with you anymore. Done. And when they ask you why, you reiterate, this is why. You didn't listen to me when I said these jokes are harmful. These hurt me. These hurt other people. And because you repeat them, it instigates violence against people. And if they don't understand that, then you walk away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I mean, I appreciate you. You don't have to have the emotional bandwidth to do that educating. That's a lot to hold, and that's not all yours. I find that typically it takes 2 questions to say, but I don't get it. Explain why that's funny, before something like that tends to fall apart. What's funny about this to you? You say you care about me. Help me understand where the joke is in this for you. And typically that can flesh it out pretty quickly. And what HR said, boundaries are healthy.
Yeah, just know when to, it's something you acquire over time. Know who you can reason with, know who you can educate. But don't take too much crap from them, because sooner or later you're going to need to cut them loose. I spent much of my life very involved in the old car world. Tends to be a white male dominated group, and older group in a lot of ways. And when I came out, I lost most of the people that I knew as friends. There's still a few that I talk to. I'm going to a show tomorrow, I will see some of these people. I make them very uncomfortable, and I have no problem with that. Some of them, I did have one friend who, I don't hear from him very much, but he, of all the people when I came out, he was the one person that really seemed concerned, you know, how is this going to affect your life? What about work? What about, you know, all the other things? What about your family? And he had honest, you know, real concerns about my future well-being from this. And was actually about the only one person who actually questioned any of these things. And we had a very nice talk, and it's just, you know, we live quite a ways apart, and don't, other than something like this, we don't see each other, but it's still, the relationship is not the same, because as nice as he is and as accepting in some ways, there's still this kind of discomfort, because these are people who I've known for 40 years in boy drag. And I just apparently, it messes with their sense. In some ways, I think it messes with their sense of what reality is. You know, why something that you kind of assume is unchangeable all of a sudden changes. So, but yeah, at some point, I've cut so many people loose that it's, I don't have time for, you know, get to a certain point. I don't have time to constantly explain things to people and point out why this isn't acceptable, and why you know, why your thinking is not productive or good for anybody. And like I said, at that point, you walk away. Leave the door open, but walk away.
Yeah.
Another question from
Another question from online. You were talking about how local businesses can ensure that staff is aware. Are there any specific training programs, perhaps certain organizations locally that do? Okay, there you go.
Yes, I think we can all talk about our training programs that we have available for various organizations. But yeah, no, I think definitely what Megan was talking about is incorporating this into your onboarding. You know, this is, you know, other than where the coffee maker is, and please, if you run out, please refill it. Also, by the way, let's talk about, you know, the people that you're going to be interacting with, and how can we best serve our customers and serve our clients, you know, and always couch it like that, because that's what you're all there for. If you've got a business, it's about the clients, it's about the people you're serving, and, you know, you want to be able to serve everybody, right? So make this part of your onboarding. There are a lot of other things that should be included into onboarding, but aren't, and this just happens to be one of them, and we're talking about today. But yeah, absolutely.
Another thing that community leaders and organizations and businesses can do is, when they have events, job fairs, community events, to make sure that organizations like Mosaic and the LGBT Center and Trees are invited to be part of those. Most people only know about our organizations through Pride events, but we should be part of community events. We should be on the invitation list to be part of all the things that go on in the community. Because the more visibility for our organizations in non-queer spaces helps people in the community know that we exist and we're available to help them. So if you are organizing, or you know people who organize events, make sure that invitations go out to a wider, more diverse group of organizations and vendors.
Also, kind of tack onto that, don't use it just as a check mark. Same as with getting diversity training from one of the many organizations up here who do that, because a lot of times we get people who call us to do those trainings and they're like, do you offer like some kind of certificate that we can hand out? And I'm like, no, we don't.
We got a button.
You're right. I'm like, because that's not the end goal, is to hand you a certificate and say, oh, you are now competent. I'm like, as we talk about in trainings all the time, I'm like, this is what you need to be working on. This is not a one-time learn it and you're done. This is lifelong. We talk about that and make sure that they understand that, this is not just checking off a box for you. You invite us to come to your job fair, that's great. But what are your policies in your workplace? Do they reflect what you're telling people when they come in and they see trees and mosaic and the LGBTQ center? People go, oh, they're very accepting of LGBTQ people. But if your policies and the way you operate do not match that, you've got other things to work on as well. And we can help you with that as well.
From a community standpoint, on one of the tables out front, recently every year, the Human Rights Campaign does an assessment of communities. It's called the Municipal Equality Index, and it just came out this week. And so I printed out copies of South Bend's grade out there. And we are not, as a community, we are not doing the best. Actually, we're pretty stagnant. We have not changed in many years, and other communities are passing us by. So I encourage you to take a copy of that and look at some of the questions in the assessments and see where the community is failing, the queer community, and use your voices to your community leaders to improve those areas. So those are on the front table. Please take one and study that. And the link, to that will give you communities all over the country, and you can compare South Bend to, other communities of same size, Midwest, and other things. And it'll be eye-opening to see all the things that we're not doing, that we could be doing, and that we should be doing.
Another thing that comes up just as you were saying that, one of the things that I reflect on quite a bit when we do some provider training is, providing gender affirming care and inclusive care is not a specialty, right? We don't see people with a trans broken foot, right? Or like, I'm not going to the dentist to get my non-binary teeth cleaned. It's knowing what you do, being an expert in your scope, and being kind to people, right? It's not practicing different care. It's just caring more.
Yeah. It's that idea of universal design.
Right.
Like, why can't all doors just automatically open for me? That would be awesome.
Why can't we all audit things?
Yeah.
My husband is bi.
I assume my queer teeth would be like vampire fangs,
Right.
is what I assume.
Well, I was gonna add that some of my medicine is transdermal.
She's here all night. Tip the wait staff.
Sorry to punish you, Morgan.
Funny, huh?
All right. If there are no more questions from Zoom, any other, we have a question in-house. Very good. Yep.
So a couple months ago, The Atlantic had a cover story about Black representation in television, and there's this tension between having sort of this real African-American people that sort of fulfilled some stereotypes, and then they had sort of, oh no, the Huxtables are the sort of, now this is quite problematic now, but they were sort of this idealized African-American, and ultimately saying, no one show with African-Americans is going to represent African-Americans. And so I was just curious if you apply that to the trans representation in television, or non-binary representation in television. Do you feel like we're still getting idealized versions or stereotyped versions, or is there, can you say that we're starting to get a range of representation that is somewhat reflective of the actual experiences of those communities?
Thank you.
I mean, my first observation is it's a good thing that like trans and non-binary people are now playing trans and non-binary people.
Yes.
And that soon as we like open the door to having people represent themselves in their own voice, and we don't just have like cis folks imagining what that experience is like, you know, that's positive movement. Are we there? No, right? Like, I think there is just still such an idea of like, we're gonna catch this one perspective, like this unified queer voice. And
Right. Well, I completely agree. I think the move to having more in the way of representation of people who are trans and non-binary actually acting trans and non-binary roles is new, and it's a good move, and I appreciate that. But I think to go a little further is, you know, are they representing what, you know, and this has always been my argument, is like, I know nobody who acts like that. You know, I'm looking at queer people on television, I'm like, yeah, they don't act like that. You know, like, where's the real life representation of queer and trans people on television and in movies? It's like, you find it maybe in small independent films, because, you know, they can do that. But when you talk about, do you see these in these big blockbuster movies or these celebrated television series that are on, you know, network or cable, and it's like, you're not seeing it yet. You're seeing these idealized or stereotypical portrayals of people, and it's like, yeah, okay, that's nice, and it's nice that we're seeing more of that, but I would like to see some more real life representation of people, and I'm just not seeing that yet. And I think until we start seeing more of that, we're not there yet. And I think, you know, the more people demand that, or when they see a representation that's not a real, a true to life representation, people have to say that. They're like, no, that's not, no, let's fix this. You know, because that's the only way it's going to change, because, you know, producers are like, oh, well, we got to play it safe. We got to, you know, they're like, oh, we got to make the trans person, you know, very likable and very, you know, stoic and brave and honorable and all this, because we want to put forth positive role models. And I'm like, I appreciate that thought. However, you know, you're also creating sometimes an unrealistic life, and then that's harmful, right? Because then we see that and we're like, well, I'm not that good. I'm not that person. You know, I don't act that way. Am I failing as a person because I'm not like that? You know, and that's a problem too. But when you see true to life representation of you and how you are, you're like, ah, yes, there we go. It creates that validation for who you are, and I think that's really important. Baby steps. It's moving in the right direction, at least, which is the positive. But
so what you're saying is we need Andrea with two fingers up walking through it.
Yes.
exactly. Walk every red carpet.
Don't I long for the
Yeah.
day that a person's insert whatever identity doesn't have to be the most salient part of them in the room,
Yes.
in film and media, right? Where that's part of their whole experience. That's part of, it's not like, oh, this is the token.
Yep. I've checked a box.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have my trans character done.
Right.
Great.
That's why Hannibal is so great. All we feel like it's good, that he eats people.
So how do you guys feel about Pose?
About what, Pose? I like it. I've enjoyed the series. I think it's been great because it has shown more complex, you know, humans for a lack of better terminology there, but yeah, it's showing a reflection of humans. Sometimes they do the right thing, sometimes they don't. Sometimes things go their way, sometimes things don't. That's life. That's how we live our lives. And I find a lot of times, especially, for the longest time, and I'm going to speak from my experience, I see a lot of movies that focus on gay men, and it's always, they're either the best friend and they're funny, or they're dying of HIV. And it's like, those are the paths. That's literally, for the longest time, when you saw gay men represented, those were the options, and that's it. And we see it still with trans and non-binary representation. It always falls into those, tragic, because it moves a story and it moves people's hearts. But again, it's like, that's not every person's experience all the time, but that's what people come away with. They're like, oh, the tragic life that they live and how terrible it is. That's what I talk about. This is the misinformation, because then parents see all of that and they're like, oh, what a terrible life trans people live. I don't want that for my child when they come out to me. And then they get bad advice, and now they're sitting in front of a conversion therapist, and that's not good. And it's like, that's why, we talk about representation, having these great, human role models. These are grown-up trans people. They're living their lives. They have jobs, they have lives, they make mistakes, they do great things. And it's like, there is a life out there for them. But if all they're seeing are these tragic paths or these, pigeonholed caricatures, it's problematic all the way around.
Very much so. I've had the experience like engaging with high school students, and occasionally I get letters from them thanking me for coming in and being a normal professional trans person, because that's not what they're seeing on social media, on TV and everything else. I've had parents come up and thank me because it gives them hope that their child could have a normal, regular future. And I'm not TV worthy. I'm actually a pretty boring person. And I think we need boring queer representation on TV.
Yes.
I was
Because that's
made
what's
for
real.
that.
Well,
You and me.
work up your headshot.
Yeah.
Your resume, get it out there.
You're in this picture and you like it.
What?
You're in this picture and you actually like it.
Right.
So, all right, we have one more question from Zoom.
Another question from online. Somebody seeking to be the best ally that they possibly can be, and asking, are there popular misconceptions that they can be aware of and understand better?
It's not a homogenous community. We're all individuals. Everything's different. Everybody's path is, we might have similarities, but we're all different. I mean, it's the good, the bad, and the ugly in every one of us. So,
Well, I think, and Megan just whispered in my ear to remind me of something. I think it's important to understand the distinction between gender identity and sexuality. And just because, yes, we are the LGBTQ community, we're not all, again, as Andrew said, we're not all homogenous. Trans people can be straight, non-binary people can be straight. They can also be gay and bi and pan. And, these are all options, and these are all, different configurations that happen, and that, I think that's the important thing, because a lot of times they're like, well, you want to transition to a woman, but why? Just be gay. Like, but that's not the same thing, And I think that's a huge misconception that a lot of people, they equate that to just, and it's unfortunate because, the gay community kind of has been a lot more visible. And so when we expand that and include the trans and non-binary and genderqueer community into that, they kind of got swept up into, oh, this is part of sexuality. And it's like, no, this is about gender identity and gender expression. And that's different than your sexuality. We talk about the you know, the magical unicorn and all the different things. And we always break that out. We're like, you know, sexuality is not gender, is not attraction, is not romantic attraction, is not sexual attraction. You know, these all things are different, and people can have different configurations of all those. And I think that's the important thing, another important thing to really understand. And that's how you can kind of fight those misconceptions, is be like, nope, just because they're trans does not mean that they're gay or bi.
And really, a lot of these labels, I mean, labels are to help us feel personally empowered right where we are, right? But my needing to understand your labels is about my wanting to know what boxes I can check for you.
Yeah.
You know, where I can fit you in the framework that I have in my mind. And that's just really unhelpful and unnecessary. You know, if I say partner versus spouse, if I say offspring versus son, I'm just giving you shorthand to like check some box, and that's not necessary.
Very good. Oh, yep.
I'm just sorry. I'm just curious your thoughts on, because a lot of this was talking about like the people who are actively harmful and things like that. But like, what about so I went to a wedding recently, and I'm genderqueer. I came out before I went to the wedding, and one of the quote unquote friends, old friend, basically saw it on Facebook and was very open about how much she supported me, but then proceeded to only use he, him the entire time that I was there, and continued to pretty much just like, and so what do you do about the people who are like very openly an ally, but then are actually harmful in much more minor ways, and almost in a sense more harmful ways in personal, because it's like, you're like, I know you say you're an ally, and now you're going to get defensive if I tell you, hey, what you're doing is not good.
Sometimes they just need to hear the hard truth.
Yeah.
Let them know. I mean, you can, yeah, it's great you're an ally. Let's work on this.
Yeah.
Look at, here's an example. You referred to me this way. You talk about, you know, you think you're such a great ally, whatever, and yet this is what you're doing. Let's think about this. You know, what can you do to change?
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, there's times to call people out, and there's other times when it's, cut your losses and walk.
Yeah. I think as an ally of the trans community myself, something that I like to do, I will start off very subtle with them, and then it just progresses as they become continuous in it. You know, if somebody was talking to me and I knew that the person they were talking about uses they, them pronouns, and they kept saying he or she, I would just be like, they. Every single time they say, she said they, and they're like, what? They. And they're like, what? They go by they. They use they, them pronouns. And if they continue doing it, then I'll be like, I need to stop you, because you need to stop doing this. You know, you claim to be an ally, you know, but I always try to start as, you know, nicely and politely and just subtly, just be like they or she or he, whatever that is, because sometimes people just need the friendly reminder. And, you know, because sometimes people need to practice that, you know, I do. There are times that I have to practice pronouns, especially when it's long-term friends who have, you know, told me that they're transitioning. I'm like, okay, I've got to practice because I've known you for 20 some years. This is a change of my vocabulary. So I'm going to put the effort in, and I'm going to do the work, you know, and if I'm not doing it, I want somebody to call me out on it, but not everybody does that. So, you know, you got to be there and be like, you say you're an ally, so I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to just correct you as you go along. But if you're not getting the hint, then it's going to progressively get a little more aggressive in your face about it.
I also love the idea of like classical conditioning. You know, give them a bracelet and say, you know, I've noticed you seem to default to he. I just wonder If we can Pavlov that. And you know, sometimes, I mean, I am not comfortable with he, him pronouns, but I will invite people to say, if you need somebody to practice they pronouns with, I'm comfortable with you doing that for me. Because chances are, if you slip, you're gonna go to she, her, and that doesn't feel misgendering for me. But that might feel that way for somebody else. So please practice using neutral pronouns with me. And that's not your labor to do with that person. But you can have them contact me, and I will give them a rubber band and invite them to they me. Okay.
Yeah.
And on that note, the practicing is super important. When I have those discussions with parents who were come out to by their child, and it's going to involve a pronoun or name change, and the child has very low tolerance for parents who make and friends who make mistakes, this is my recommendation to those friends, allies, and family, is write the new name, the pronouns on Post-it notes and put them around the house. Put them on the mirror, put them on the fridge, put them in front of your computer, put them on the steering wheel of your car. The more you see them, the more you'll say them internally, and the more that you'll flip that over. All this is practice and memory, memorization. Then when that person is standing in front of them, it's more than likely going to come to the forefront of what you say, instead of trying to practice when that person is in front of you. So write it down, look at it, say it, practice it, practice it, practice it, so that your interaction is respectful at the time that that person is in front of you. And I've had a lot of parents saying, that made it so quick. It turned over so much faster because they were just practicing. They see it and you internally say it, and it's going to flip that over. So, all right, we are at time. I want to thank the panel for affording us the time today. I personally would like to thank everybody who has given us your attention and time in being here. This is a very important day, every year for the trans community. And yeah, I'm grateful that we have an audience, because we get together and talk about this all the time. But it's nice to have others join in on these conversations and also to share your thoughts. So thank you, everybody. Again, grab some resources on the way out. There's probably some more snacks in there. Grab those too, because I don't want to eat cookies all weekend. But thank you, everybody, and have a safe Christmas.